really an exciting afternoon for me to be here with you. And as my colleagues have said, to really talk through this issue of E-levy and to see what we can do as a country to move forward and also move really out of the shackles of the West, where we continue to borrow so much money and then they dictate to us what we should do. So this is an emancipation of sort, and we should really take it to heart. We are the black star. We are the shining star of Africa. And there are three pillars that we deem we should incorporate, because ours is a country that leads, and it's an idea for the continent. So we started as the first independent sub-Sahara Africa country in Nkrumah's time. For our size, we led the whole continent into democracy. It took almost 60 years for us to then have an organ of the AU in our country, and that was the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which really it's the new independence. Emancipating ourselves politically in the 60s and then moving at this time to being the hub for investments and trade, which is the new economy that we have to. But there are three pillars that our president always wants to remind us about when we talk about Ghana beyond aid. And this, in his mind, is a political independence, and Ghana, therefore, as a beacon of democracy and a safe space in this region. The second one being economic emancipation, Ghana beyond aid, which we really were en route to achieving before COVID. And even that, I think we are going to recover strongly for it. And the third leg, which the president has also emphasized on, is our spiritual independence. And so even in the midst of this leading politically, a great carryover in terms of our economic achievements, and now what we call the National Cathedral, which is also going to be a centerpiece of what Ghana represents. So Ghana as an idea is something that we should capture. But what does that mean? It's going to require us to be a confident, prosperous society with the human capital that is required to be able to raise our heads and lead Africa and the black race complete emancipation. But it's going to take some sacrifices on our part and a clarity for us that we are leaders and will do extraordinary things. So this is our lot, and this is where the president insists that we should step up in history to be able to achieve that and lead Africa out of this morass. And we have seen it, especially during this time of the COVID experience, where the West have left us where we should be. We have a system in Africa where literally 90% of all our pharmaceuticals are imported, and a whole series of things that create dependency. And therefore, when the global supply chain is cut, we have problems, big problems. So we went through 2017 to 2019 with incredibly stellar results as to what we as a country had been able to achieve, moving from 3.4% of growth to somewhere over 7%, reducing our budget deficits from 6.5% into about 5%, making sure that our currency did not depreciate as it used to be, and it's quite stable, and also having the necessary foreign exchange cover to make sure that we are able to support our currency and our imports. During this period, we did the impossible. We spent over 40 billion cedis on education, 14 billion on healthcare, 14.9 billion on enhancing internal security, 18 billion on flagship projects, and it just continues as to the things that we were able to do with monies that the NDC were sure we will never be able to get. So the benefits have been for all of us, an all-inclusive growth in which about 1.26 million people have benefited from free SHS, 3.45 million covered by school feeding program, the NAPCO, 100,000 young persons, the largest in our history, and over 344 households given lifeline under the LEAP program. So for us, the sovereignty of our people is clear. Everybody as a citizen having a part in this enterprise of this idea of a Ghana that is confident, prosperous, and leading the nation states of the world. Our president has also earned incredible international repute, and now when Ghanaians walk outside or even here, NDC or MPP, their heads are high because they know that Akufo-Addo has done it. Let's give him a clap. So we have to continue with these initiatives. And that then is a challenge of where do we get the resources to be able to do this. Traditionally, when you are caught in such a vice, you go to petrol, you increase it, and we know the cataclysmic effect it has on all of us when we do that. So the good Lord, looking at what the president does, led us into this area of e-commerce. As the minister mentioned, we have grown from a country that was transferring about 78 billion a year in 2016 to over 500 billion this year, likely to be close to $1 trillion, 950 billion next year. Now that is a system that everyone uses, that all of us use. So when she talks about only 2.4 million people paying taxes to support the 30.8 million, you begin to see the enormity of pressure on these 2.4 million people. And how is that sustainable? How do you deepen democracy if you do not pay taxes? Your ability to challenge the political elite is muted, or you join in some underhanded things that we should not be doing. So we came back with the E-levy, purportedly for three reasons. Well, first, certainly to broaden the tax base, and then to increase revenue. And when you look at Ghana and the rest of our region, we have about 12.2% or so revenue to GDP, which is awfully low compared to our neighbors, 16.5% and up. That we cannot sustain. So we need to cure that. And then when you even look at the distribution of how we pay taxes, you have literally 88% being paid in Greater Accra, and the Eastern region. I have you know that if we combine Eastern region, Ashanti region, and Western region together, they pay 3% of national taxes. That can't be right. And the population will bear me out that that can't be right. So we must all find a way to what we call burden share to be able to do that. So let's dig deep in ourselves. Nobody likes taxes. But really, if you look at our debt situation, what we need to do, so we raise our own money to be able to build the roads that Kwesi Amwakwata is looking for, that all of you are looking for, then we must pay our way through it. If we begin to look at our employment issues, and I think that's a place that is really passionate for our president. And there's good reason for that, because what are we saying? We are saying that under the age of 24, you literally have 56% of our population in that zone. And when you look at economically active people in our country, you have about 11 million people, and that also then requires that we look at that population. Now, if you were to even begin to look, because of the issue of education, you have about 4.6 million people at primary school. By the time we get to JHS, we move to 2.6 million. So what happened to the 1.8 million of those children of ours? From JHS to SHS, we move from 2.6 to 1.2 million. So what happened to that group of people in that category? And then from SHS to tertiary schools of all nature, we get to about 500,000. So 700,000 people have vanished. And then we train them in tertiary institutions, and maybe 10% or less may get jobs. So we have an explosive problem on our hands, not because it might only cause chaos, but the sovereign rights of every individual as a Ghanaian must be something that we care about. We cannot hide our head in the sand, pretending that this is not an issue that would cripple our country and really demean the status of our persons as Ghanaians. But we are people who are the black star, who should be shining, who should be leading in the world. So, the President is extremely worried about unemployment, and therefore this 10 billion U-Start program, the largest that the country has ever seen, young pioneer pales in comparison to it or anything else. And this also came through effective burden sharing. Burden sharing in the effect that we then approached the banks, and the banks agreed to provide 5 billion for private sector and small businesses for the next 3 years. We approached our international financial partners. They agreed for another 2 billion, that's 7 billion to support this effort. And government itself, through the E-levy, will do 1 billion cedis a year to ensure that this 10 billion package enables us to take care of our youth, which is really important to each one of us. Because really, at the center of our party is the reverence for the individual citizen. Because it is that human capital that makes the difference in all that we do. And it is something that our friend, Second Deputy Majority Leader mentioned, that we have all experienced. Because yes, you see all of us here like that, but we all had very humble beginnings, and therefore I grew up in Chebi, lived a mile away from school, wake up in the morning, you go to the river, get your water, put your plantain in your pocket, and walk 1 mile from where we live to Chebi Government School. If you get to the school, because Brame is on the way and you might decide to swim all day instead of going to school. So that was what happened. And then fortunately, Dad decided that, oh, I have some son in Chebio, so let me find him. And that is what made the difference. The intervention that changed from you not being the smartest person in your Chebi school, because you didn't even go to school. You typically went swimming to find some okoto to catch. So that be it. And that changed the trajectory of my life to be standing here today, being the finance minister. And also fortunately had a strong mother who decided not to abort because she was young, and the young man from the royal family had come home for holidays, and one thing led to the other, and the poor woman was at fault for my dad's problems. But anyway, So this is it. So the issue of President Akufo-Addo insisting on senior high school is because he knows the transformation that would occur in that. But then it leads to human capital that must also be helped on its way forward to realize, who they are and what they can do for themselves and the nation. So over this period, we have spent all of this wonderful money to be able to bring our economy into some stability until COVID hit. And COVID, has been devastating globally, and therefore all of us had to recalibrate one way or the other how we move forward. But even in the middle of that confusion, you had a president who was clear in his mind, as he said, don't ever waste a crisis. So charge the Ministry of Finance to come up with a transformation program, even in the middle of that. That's the Mother Cares Obatampa program, so that we move our legs, we continue to look towards the sun, and find a way that when the COVID is over, we will be ahead of the game. So we have the issues of debt, we have the issues of employment, and we have Kwesi Amwakwate's issues that we have to deal with, which we all embrace because we want roads, we want digital infrastructure, we want physical infrastructure. And this is what we have brought to Parliament. What do we do about this? And the numbers are clear that the economy is shifting from the physical to the virtual, and therefore we need to be up ahead of the game. So we then brought to Parliament a 1.75% levy. As the Minister has mentioned, this is not the most egregious tax that you could get, but it really leads to the issue of inclusion of all of us to build our society and wherever we really want to go to transform this land. And that has been the subject of this debate. The question is, do we want to move to this new Jerusalem? Do we want to move to this new El Dorado so that we can, as a people, show that with our own resources, and there's plenty of it, as we see various buildings coming up in this country. And even as you look at 1D, 1F, I think we started the 181 or so 1D, 1Fs around. Nobody thought it was possible, of which 106 are complete around the districts, and 81 odd and more are happening. You can also see what happened of Planting for Food that has resulted, in a sense, in actually being able to export some food at certain points in time. So that really is the reason. Can we sustain our debt and pay for it ourselves so we don't go out borrowing so much? Can we have the resources to support employment, which is key and affects all of us, and really is very dispiriting and breaks down the dignity of our people? That is not the people that we are. And then can we support our infrastructure to be able to then increase productivity, move around the country, and create that modern society that we talk about. And that really, in a sense, is also now going to be elevated by AFCFTA, which is here, so that the issue of regionalizing our economy is now upfront with us. And that is a logistics hub, automobile hub, tourism hub, healthcare hub, etc. And then you see the modern economy that our forebears were confident that we will be able to construct in our land and show Africa and the world the way to go. So when people say, why E-levy and why you should reduce it? Well, we listened. We truly listened and said, well, maybe when something is new, you can have very negative thoughts on that. But we've heard a lot of the history of that, and that people one way or the other in opposition would oppose anything, whether it's good or bad. But we all know that the council norma effect and the sika and Nti yɛhwɛ yɛn ayɛ sika na yɛmfa ntɔ adeɛ a ɛhia yɛn. So that really is what we talk about when we say we want this E-levy to ensure that we are masters of our own destiny, that what happened with COVID will not have such a devastating effect because we'll have our own resources and we'll be able to guide ourselves in the way in which we've managed. So we've come a long way from being in the grips of the IMF to our freedom to be able to do what we do. And I think people forget what happened when we were in the IMF program. We couldn't pay for nurses and teachers. We couldn't hire anymore because there were restrictions on that. I mean, it's just really thinking you can go back to Egypt in a way in which we have forgotten how difficult and pernicious that master from Washington was. So we can deal with them for them to give us advice, but we need not ever get into IMF program. And if we don't do this E-levy, you are just pushing yourself in a way that would potentially end up in such a disaster. And I mean, there was a warning of that because last week was a very difficult week for the country. Last week we got downgraded by Fitch, ostensibly because they did not believe we could raise the revenues that we had forecasted because we were fighting about E-levy. But what does that mean when you get downgraded and the spreads widen for your bonds? Essentially, what we are saying is that if you go back to the market, you may pay about 500 basis points more, which means that if I borrowed $1 billion, I pay $50 million more each year. The bonds are usually 10 years, and so 50 times 10, that's $500 million a year. All because we were arguing and not being able to make up our mind on resources that we needed. So we need to moderate that because the consequences are quick. But I'm sure last week there were other things that also were difficult for us as a country. The Bogoso incident was not good for anybody. And then, of all places, Comoros could beat us in soccer. Now that should not ever happen again. I hope the coach has been taking our geography out of our country by now. So this is where we are with E-levy and why we therefore need it, why we should be passionate about it. It will give us about 6.9 billion Ghana cedis, but it's really the beginning because as you put these taxes in place, you sharpen the administration of it, and as the growth trajectory as described by the minister will be clear, that is going to be an anchor for our taxation and therefore a continuing capacity and robustness of our ability to get the revenue mobilization that is required. Now, the E-levy, what does it cover? I'm sure we'll do a Q&A on that. So it's mobile money transfers between accounts on the same electronic money issuer, mobile money transfers from an account on one EMI to a recipient on another EMI, transfers from bank accounts to mobile money accounts, transfers from mobile money accounts to bank accounts, and bank transfers on a digital platform application which originate from a bank account belonging to an individual. Then also, what does it not cover? Cumulative transfers of 100 cedis per day by the same person. So if you transfer 100 cedis per day, there's no E-levy on that. I remember being Fenchiniko or Achimhimai is the new improved name, where a lady said, Nasada, Yendi, 100 cedis you could for a dos. Na bosome bia say enya 3,000 cedis. A month for a dimia transfer. Inti adan na, you know, 100 cedis exemption no. One of the audience a high dodo. It's a 30 cedis, 20 cedis na a ho adwuma. So hokran po nipa tiase. Say, you know, we should encourage that. But really, we have pegged it at 100 per day, which means 3,000 a month you will not touch. And I'm not sure there are any poor people below above the 3,000 level. So transfers between accounts owned by the same person would also not be touched by e-levy. Transfers for the payment of taxes, fees, and charges, and anything on the Ghana.gov platform would also not be charged. Electronic clearing of checks is exempt, and specified merchants, i.e. merchants whose payments to commercial establishments are registered with GRA for income tax and VAT purposes. And then transfers between the principal, master agents, and agent accounts would also not be charged. So really, in the end, that becomes, you know, where the tire meets the road. And what we are saying, in effect, is in looking at these issues of debt, of employment, of infrastructure, I think we should all look to support this. 1.75% of monies that you send around is not the money that is going to kill you, but the cumulative effect of moving from 2.4 million to maybe 11, 12 million paying their part of our taxes will just create this pool of resources for us to be able, as a country, to continue to hold our heads high and be that free, independent nation of pride with the three pillars of political independence, economic emancipation, and spiritual, I don't know what the word should be, also spiritual elevation would occur for us as a country. So let's really hold our MPs' feet to the fire to let them know that we understand who we are as a people, a proud nation who want to pay their own way. Yes, we haven't for a long time. And then there are issues of accountability. And in going through over Christmas to Enyinam, Apapem, Himai, and then Pram Pram in Greater Accra, it was very clear, as Honorable Markin mentioned, the issue of accountability. So how do I then come to you every quarter or to Parliament to show how those resources were used, to show what we have used E-levy for, so that we all move in step and begin, you know, to reduce the cynicism on politicians and accountability for all of us. But when you pay, you are likely to have that voice to be able to yell, shout, and demand that. Yeah. So we have the Youth Start program as part of it going forward. We'll be able to sustain our debt and reduce it and pay our way through, and the issues of infrastructure, digital and physical, would also, especially roads, will also be taken care of. So ladies and gentlemen, this really is an opportunity to ask other questions that may be on your heart, and to understand the sincerity of where government is coming from, with even the limited resources, the amazing record that we have established, and what we need to do these 3 years, and then to continue to break the 8, because we have been shown to be faithful with little, and therefore will do more. So, as the Bible says in Genesis, if these people can speak one language, then there will be no restraint to what we can do. So let's speak this one language of E-levy, let's make it pass, and there will be no restraint to where we'll go as a people. But we need the spirit of courage, of love, and self-discipline for us to get there. Thank you very much.
Ma Yemonsem, Honorable Minister for Finance, Honorable Ken Furiata, Honorable Bano Beyin Semnibiano,